I know what you're thinking. Charles, have you been drinking? Yes. Very astute observation. We did a BAC Olympics for the other channel today. Don't want to spoil anything, but I performed very well. Besides the point, I may have been drinking, but no amount of alcohol would be enough to make me enjoy the finale of The Acolyte. Now, I've made 2 videos on The Acolyte. I've been very open and honest. I haven't really liked a lot of the Star Wars content that's come out over the last, decade and some change. Save for a couple of exceptions like Andor or the first 2 seasons of Mandalorian, or, very hot take, even the Solo standalone movie. But aside from that, I just haven't found myself enjoying much of it, and The Acolyte is something I started just because of how much it was shit on by the majority of people, and I just can't resist horrible media. I'm drawn to awful media like a Coke addict to baking soda. So, I indulged in this property to see if it really is as bad as everyone was saying, and while not good, I didn't think it was the worst thing Star Wars has ever made. Once again, that achievement, I still believe belongs to Book of Boba Fett, but now after finishing The Acolyte, I can say for certain it still belongs to Book of Boba Fett. The Acolyte isn't good, but there are some things about it that I did like. And by some things, I mean really kind of just one thing. The action. I know there's a lot of people out there saying there's nothing good about The Acolyte at all, but I think that's just being exaggeratory for the sake of it. The action is probably the best since the prequels. Like, the lightsaber fights I actually found to be pretty hype. Now, of course, there's some goofiness to it, and yeah, you can kind of nitpick them, but they are flashy, they are fun, and I did enjoy pretty much every action sequence. Aside from that, though, there's not a whole lot else to like about it. Narratively, I think it's kind of a mess, and there's going to be spoilers here. There's no way for me to talk about this show without getting into spoilers. I think the most egregious example, I'm starting to fumble some words around, but, I'm taking the field sobriety test here with the Acolyte trivia breakdown. I think the most egregious example of lazy writing is in episode 7. So episode 7's this big revelation for the sins of the past, with the Jedi being bad and in the wrong with Osha and May and the cult of witches. So I don't even hate the whole Jedi bad thing that a lot of people are really starting to spit about. That doesn't bother me. I'm fine with that as long as you build it up properly and you make it make sense. Here it doesn't. So when the big revelation comes and they catch you with the fucking backdoor reach around, like, here's the huge twist, it's very silly. So it turns out that Torben, the guy who was floating for 16 fucking years, literally in suspended animation, basically just snoozing, acting like Zenyatta, and then May shows up and he decides to kill himself, drinking poison and thanking her for it. His crime was wanting to leave the planet the witches were on early. So the Jedi were stationed on Bryndock looking at virgins, and they ended up accidentally stumbling upon the witches. Sol saw the twins, and that led them to the witches, and Torben was crying about wanting to go home early. Wah, 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 give me some fucking French cries, we've been here too long, I want to go home. So what ends up happening is Torben, in his haste to leave, decides to storm the witch's place to try and speed things along. Sol follows, and then it's an absolute fucking disaster. Osha, as you all know from the previous episodes, wanted to go with the Jedi. May did not. There was this big back and forth conundrum with the witches where their mother, who was the head of the coven, was going to let Osha go with the Jedi. She's like, you know what? These are very important girls to the coven, and if Osha wants to be a Jedi, who are we to stop her? So she was already on board. This is what Osha wants, this is what Osha's going to do. So Sol and Torben getting there early definitely throws a wrench in everything, but what ends up happening is shit starts to get poopy. You have the big disagreement between May and Osha, where Osha has a wild overreaction and decides to just set everything on fire, watch it all burn, and then Sol and Torben are with the witches, tensions are very high, and then it reaches a boiling point where the mother, in a panic, decides to turn into a smoke demon in front of Sol. Without telling Sol that Osha decided to go with the Jedi, and Sol is there, kind of talking about it, without informing him that that was the decision Osha made, that they were going to abide by, she gets some news and turns into Smoke Monster. So she starts, fucking evaporating into this, dark cloud, this dark energy, and Sol stabs her, which kills her. And then as she's dying, she says, we were going to let Osha go with you, she chose the Jedi, and then collapses and dies. And that is the major shame of the Jedi. In response to her getting killed by Sol, the rest of the witches, I guess all of the witches, then decide to mind jack Kelnaka, the Wookiee Jedi, and then, they fight Kelnaka, and it ends with him being overpowered, and then all of a sudden, when clearing Kelnaka's mind, it kills all of the witches who, force hacked into his brain. So they were doing, some kind of trance in order to take control of him, and when that connection was severed, all of them died. All of them, apparently. It took, the entire coven to do that one stunt, that one little trick. So when that was broken, it killed all of them, and that kind of finishes that off, and then, of course, the fire. I shouldn't really need to explain why this is super stupid, but I'm going to anyway. Why would the mother not start the conversation with, hey, we've got our, disagreements, we don't see eye to eye, but Osha did choose you, and we're going to let her do that. Why would she instead fucking jump scare everyone by turning into a smoke monster in front of them without explaining anything? Soul's not even in the wrong for reacting the way he did. That could be perceived as a huge fucking threat to, everyone. Maybe even the twins. Oh, maybe the mom's gonna kill the twins because we're here and, Osha might want to go with us. She didn't convey any useful information. She instead just transforms into a cloud of smoke. All she had to do was just communicate, and this whole thing could have been avoided. It also could have been avoided if Torben wasn't in some kind of speed run to get off the planet. I think that's super silly. So there were two very easy ways this could have been avoided if the characters were just thinking rationally. And that's my big complaint about the series. The only reason things happen is because other characters were doing stupid shit. So it feels really unfulfilling. I don't even mind some of the story beats. Like I said, the whole Jedi bad thing, I don't mind. I think that can work really well. And it's not like that's never been done before in Star Wars. They made that really clear in Star Wars that the Jedi became complacent, a lot of the things that go wrong, go tits up, is because the Jedi are just kind of lazy assholes. That's not new. But the way that they get to that in this series is just not very good. And the finale does nothing to really solve that problem. I don't hate the finale. I think it's a fun final fight between Soul and the Stranger. I actually do like the Stranger, but I think he is also a pretty silly character. There's not a lot that was explored about him, but I like the Cortosis helmet. I think that's cool. The short-circuiting lightsabers by fucking headbutting them. And, him dual-wielding, the tiny saber and the big saber. It's flashy and it's fun. But if you really start to think about what the character has said, he's a goddamn goofball. His whole motivation is, I want to do what I want to do. What is he, 6 years old? What, he wants to play in a fucking sandbox or something without mom and dad coming out there telling him he's got to go to bed and brush his teeth? What? Who cares? That's stupid. That's a really dumb motivation. His whole thing is, the Jedi kind of betrayed him. They don't really explain exactly how. I'm sure that'll be in the future if they do a season 2 or something. God forbid. But the only real information we know about him is his primary motive here is, hey, I got fucked and now I want to be fucking. And I don't want anyone to have any complaints about it. So he wants to, be free to be himself and use his power how he sees fit. And he really wants to train somebody. This guy fucking loves being a teacher. And he's not the only one. Soul was obsessed with training the twins. He really wanted Osha to be his Padawan. So much so that he ended up killing and leading to the death of an entire coven of witches. I think it's a little fucking over the top how obsessed Soul was with being, the master to these potential Padawans. So much so that he would be willing to do something horrible. And this leads to, the whole cover-up thing where after the events of this, they buried all of it so that way it wouldn't surface. But you didn't really need to. So, a thing that comes in the finale here is about, Soul thought he was in the right for what he did, and Osha pushes back saying, well, if you thought you were in the right, why didn't you tell the Jedi? I mean, that's a fucking slam dunk right there. That's checkmate. She got you with the scholar's mate. That's a great point. If you thought you were in the right, why even cover it up? And you covered up significantly more than what was necessary. If a big reveal is that Osha and May aren't twins, they're the same person, but ultimately that doesn't really matter because they are still two different characters in the show. They're fundamentally still just twins, but regardless, they are the same person made from the power from the Virgins on the planet. why wouldn't they just share that information with the Jedi? That wouldn't really implicate them in any like big crimes that happened on the planet. And also a big thing is that Sol didn't reveal a whole lot because he needed May to be alive in order to convince the Jedi. Why? You could still have that work with just Osha. You don't need both of them unless I missed a crucial component there. That just seems like actual mumbo jumbo. Like, why do you need both of them in order to convince them that this is real? Like, you have Osha, who is the product of the Virgins. Do you need May too? Like, you could have still... Like, I don't know. That just was really dumb, and it felt like they kind of backed themselves into a corner on trying to explain why it needed to be covered up to the level that it was. And I don't think they explained it super well, because ultimately, it didn't need to reach that level. Again, I don't understand why he couldn't just share that information about the Virgins creating life here with Osha and not May. Really, a lot of everything that goes wrong in this show can be easily explained by the characters just didn't want to talk to each other. Like, it really seems like the characters have a huge apprehension with communication. Like, they just do not share information that would be extremely helpful for some fucking reason. And another really convenient thing that they bring out for the finale is a mind eraser, literally a Men in Black neuralizer. So the Stranger has the ability to just wipe someone's mind, which is an incredibly convenient ability. And then, of course, it then goes in to try and explain how all of this never really reached the point that it should, where people were aware that the Sith are back. And I really think the way that it gets to that is dumb too. But man, that mind wash, like the scrubbing of memories, was such an ass pull. I think that has been like established in Star Wars lore at some point. Like, I definitely think I've read that. I haven't seen it, but I definitely think I've read it. But the way they bring it out here, I just think is so fucking stupid. And of course, it's not Star Wars without your favorite cameos blasting onto the screen to get people hype and just, going ballistic seeing them. So the back of Yoda's head's there. A split second of Plagueis is there. But it doesn't do anything to make it better. It's just there to remind people of cool shit that Star Wars used to have. It's just so disappointing because I'm not even touching on like how it ties into established Star Wars lore. To me, that's not the most important thing. For me, it's about, can this show stand on its own two legs without Star Wars in it? Like, if this had no tie to Star Wars, would this be a good show on its own? And for me, the answer is no. I just really don't think it knew how to actually get to the things that it wanted to. So, Osha turns to the dark side. She bleeds her lightsaber in the finale, and then she runs away happily ever after with the Stranger. And it doesn't work. Like, at no point do they really build Osha into that decision. It just kind of happens, like, super suddenly. 1 second, she's like, Jedi. Jedi, May, you really fucked up and you're evil and bad for what you've done. And then she gets fed some new information about, like, what Sol did and instantly turns to the dark side without anything really building to that. Like, yes, that's super alarming information, but it's not like May's innocent either. May is also very much responsible for a lot of what happened with the death of their mother and the entire coven. So, like, I feel like that decision to immediately turn to the dark side happens so quickly, and she immediately becomes extremely powerful, force choking and killing Sol almost effortlessly. Like, everything just kind of happens right when it needs to, immediately, without any proper build up to it. So it just feels like fucking whiplash seeing a character change so quickly. So overall, I just didn't think this show was very good. I still maintain that it's not the worst Star Wars show like a lot of people are saying it is. I still comfortably think that title belongs to the Book of Boba Fett. I think it hangs on to that prestige. But this one is definitely not good. It's another bad Disney Star Wars product, unfortunately. But I said I would finish it, and I finished it. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about it a little bit. If I was to put it on the moist meter, I'd give it like a 35% maybe-ish, somewhere in that general ballpark. I'm not really sure. But anyway, that's really about it. So yeah.